So sorry for the mix-up, guys. It's happened a couple times recently. Rusty on my copying and pasting. Thanks for figuring that out with me. Okay, let's get right to it. It's a little bit behind here, but we will have enough time with today's bell length. So. Okay, routine stuff. Grammar Unit 2 test that was posted, I think, yesterday morning. That is due by tonight. So if you haven't already done that, let's get that done. Get your full credit test grade there. Vocabulary, lesson 10 bookwork, sections 1 through 4, usual stuff. That is due by tonight. Other than that, we are moving on to 1984 by George Orwell. Between the briefness of this quarter and the length of the novel, this is going to take us more like from now through spring break rather than just the rest of this quarter. I don't know if you noticed, but progress reports didn't even happen this quarter. Then we had the snow delays, and we've got like 11 days left of this quarter. All we have left is next week, and then a Monday through Thursday week, but they're most certainly going to call off that Thursday right before that in-service, because that will be the next day after we all get our shots, and all the teachers are going to be all messed up from side effects of the shots. There's no way they're going to have school. I'll just tell you that right now, even though they haven't announced it yet. So we just have Thursday and Friday, Monday through Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and that's the quarter, okay? So keep that in mind. We probably will do a timed writing or two next week to start practicing for your EOC test, which is allegedly still going to happen. So we're going to pay attention to that and make sure we're on top of that to get those couple crucial writing grades. A little bit different from doing full paper. But other than that, it's just, you know, the usual homeworks, participation, and getting this full credit test grades shouldn't be a problem to keep a good grade. All you have to do is do your stuff. Okay, so 1984 by George Orwell. I don't know whether you guys know anything about this book specifically, but we're going to talk a lot today about the concept of dystopia literature. We're going to read an article from Common Lit, which is a website that I'm going to start using. I've looked at before. I haven't really made classes in it, but I have now. Then I'll show you our sequence of materials for reading, and there is also a video. It's a crash course video if you've ever seen one of those. The guy's real smart. He's pretty funny. He's a writer himself, and he talks about the specific historical context and origin of the book, 1984. And there's like a 13-question study guide in there that you do. You have until tomorrow night to do that video stuff because you got grammar and vocab tonight. But for now, let me go over to our classwork tab here. And you will see in here, okay, first of all, there's your crash course video. Okay, so that's linked there. Got it, it's on YouTube, and you got 13 questions there to do. You have till tomorrow night to do that. But today, first of all, we want you guys to get registered for Common Lit. Okay, so I've got a classroom in there, kind of like with Newsela. So if we open this attachment here, you want to find this thing, okay? So you guys might want to just kind of come off my screen share and go to your own thing because you'll probably be able to read a little bit better. And I want you to go into Common Lit, following these instructions, join my classroom, and you should see that I've assigned an article, and we're going to read a good part of that article just today together in class and answer a couple reading questions just to kind of keep us sharp. So I'm going to pour a little cup of coffee and let you guys get in there. So again, it's the Common Lit assignment post. Open up that attachment, follow the directions. I know it works because we did it first bell. I'm going to come off my screen share. So make sure you're looking at your own assignment to do that. While you're doing that, I don't know whether you guys have heard the rumor, but it's looking like fourth quarter, there's going to be some weird schedule return to in-person learning. Have you guys heard this? Yep. Yep. I think there'll still be an option for staying home for those families that feel like that really still needs to happen. And that is going to be the hardest part of it, because teaching an in-person class and including students remotely feels kind of logistically impossible for me, but I guess we'll have to figure out a way to do it. I think it's going to be some kind of A-B schedule, you know, like a lot of CPS has been doing, where half of the schools is there on an A day and half of the schools there on a B day. And then you go to all of your classes, maybe for a longer length or something. I don't know. I haven't seen the schedule yet, but something like that's in the works. So tell your parents to watch their emails, and you watch your emails too, and there'll be something that will be surfacing about that. I can't give you all the details yet. I know it's scary, isn't it? Claire's like, oh my God, I don't want to switch. I'm used to this. And I don't want my classes split up where I have half the class one day and half class the other. It just makes planning too hard. But, you know, there's a lot of pressure in the community to get back to in-person learning, no matter how we have to do it. And so I guess they feel like that's the only way they can do it and maintain some kind of decent spacing, which is still an issue. This is all kind of guessing. Did you guys get a Common Lit? Is that working and everything? Okay. Are you getting to the article about someone watching? Okay. If you got stuck and something is confusing, it's not absolutely essential, I'm going to go to a screen share. You can stay on your screen if you've gotten to the article. Let's see. But if not, you can come back to my screen share, and I'm going to bring the article up myself. Someone might be watching an introduction to dystopian fiction. Okay, who knows, before we even start reading, what the word dystopia means? What is a dystopia, and what is dystopian literature? You have any idea? Feel free to just speak up. What other word does it sound kind of like? Let's put it that way. Dystopia? Sounds kind of like what? Nobody's saying anything. It sounds kind of like utopia. You know what that word means? What kind of world is a utopia?
Isn't a utopia a perfect world? Perfect.
Utopia is like a perfect world, right? Like everything's ideal, right? Now we've kind of learned throughout history that, you know, no matter how many technological and socioeconomic advances we make, it's not really possible, right? Like other problems come up because of just like faults in human nature and things like that. So dystopia would be the opposite of that. In other words, a world's gone wrong somehow, right? Through some aspect of government, through technology. You know, we might think of like social media dystopias and things like that. So thinking of that, you can probably think of some stories, novels that you've read for school or otherwise, movies that you've seen. What would be an example of dystopia stories? It's not quite the same thing as sci-fi or fantasy. It's not like another world. It's our world, but it's gone horribly wrong in some way, at least from our perspective. What would be some examples of stories like that? Oh, I got people in chat. Somebody saying a perfect world, utopia, I'm sorry. Terminator, absolutely, that's a classic for sure. Yeah, it is about our world. And that involves time travel, but yeah, that's still, the machine's taking over, right? That's a dystopic scenario. As far as older movies, The Matrix, Matrix movies, very much like that. They're making another one of those soon. What about kind of young adult literature kind of stuff that you guys might have even read, like in middle school or anything like that?
Would The Giver be kind of like that?
Absolutely, great book, The Giver by Lois Lowry. I think there was a movie made sometime in the last decade also about that. That's a good one. That one kind of borrows from classic dystopia books. Like the two big classic dystopia books, American novels, are actually British, are 1984 by George Orwell, which is what we're reading, and A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which you'll probably read when you're a senior. There's also another one called Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury that you'll probably read next year. Very often included as one book in English class because it's a pretty big genre, and it makes you think a lot. The Hunger Games, I mean, surely some of you have watched The Hunger Games, if not read them. That's very much a dystopia future.
That with
Technology.
Divergent.
Divergent, absolutely. Divergent borrows a lot from Brave New World. Those are both books and movies. Any of those, Maze Runner, is kind of a little bit younger readers type thing. So they all borrow from these classic dystopic works, 1984 and Brave New World. So let's start reading through this. And you'll notice as we go, it keeps a section, I don't know whether you've ever worked with Common Lit before, it keeps the next section of the article blurred out until you answer these multiple choice questions that come up. Okay, so it's not a grade, not high pressure or anything, but just pay attention and answer each one of those as we get to them. And then that'll, once you get the right answer, you can try multiple times. That opens up the next section of the article for you. We'll keep going. So I'll start off, and then I would very much love it if some people could participate, maybe even kind of spirit read through parts of this to give my voice a break and earn some points. So, an introduction to dystopian fiction. So dystopian stories are commonplace in our society today. In this informational text, Shelley Ostergaard discusses the characteristics of dystopian fiction and how the genre comments on society. As you don't have to take notes, don't worry about that. Okay, so walking through carnivals, we love to laugh at the versions of ourselves that appear in the funhouse mirror. We delight in taking selfies with filters that artificially bulge out our noses or shrink our mouths. But sometimes these distortions take on a deeper meaning and force us to notice things about ourselves. You don't notice that your nose is a little large until you take a picture with the filter and compare. You make it really large, right? Something that is exaggerated can point out something that really is there. In other words, the version of yourself in the mirror shows you things about yourself. Dystopias are usually constructed through this type of magnification. So like a figurative magnification. But the subject matter goes far deeper than noses and lips. It's looking at the world, right? Society. Authors take troubling aspects of their own society and imagine a world where they're taken to the extreme. The 21st century tendency to over-document through the use of technology, social media, becomes a compulsion acted out through a literal recording of our memories, right? That could be a dystopic story, and pretty much is. An invasive state becomes one that criminalizes thoughts. You ever seen Minority Report with Tom Cruise? Good movie that kind of does that. A love of reality television and a saturation of violence becomes a society where teens are forced to fight to the death for entertainment. What's that talking about? Of course. What story? A love of reality television. That's the Hunger Games, right? Okay, so because of how they're constructed, dystopias are often seen as a desperate warning sign. Okay, it's a cautionary tale, right? The truth is, dystopian fiction presents a funhouse mirror of our collective selves. It forces the audience to stare transfixed at the small flaws that we have, that our society has, which in the mirror, exaggerated, become pronounced enough to produce a monster. All right, try to answer that little multiple choice question off to the side, see if you get it right. They kind of give you questions where it looks like more than one could be kind of right. What's the best answer? You got it. Okay, so it emphasizes real problems in our society by presenting almost grossly exaggerated versions of them, which, although they might seem silly to us at the time, might come true, right? And some of the best works, 1984, in some ways, kind of saw into the future as far as how much surveillance we'll have in our lives. One big difference is in 1984, it's depicted as the government surveilling our lives, which was a big concern in the post 9/11 world just before you were born. But now, as in contrast to 1984, in what ways are our lives surveilled and listened to really deeply? Not the government, but what? Who's listening to you all the time? What technology, what entities are listening to you all the time?
Our phones.
Your phones, yeah. In other words, companies, corporations selling things, they're listening to you, right? For a while, people thought it was coincidence when they had a conversation about some product, and then you look at your phone and it's the first ad you see. It's not a coincidence. We know that now, right? And we just, it was shocking for a very shockingly short amount of time, and now we just accept it, right? Well, think how much scarier that would be if it were the government following you around that much. Maybe they are. We don't always know, right? Okay. Starting in the next section, can I get maybe a volunteer to read? Take all turns. History of dystopias.
I'll read it.
Thank you. The term dystopia.
Usually constructed through this type of magnification, but the subject matter goes.
I don't think you're in the right place.
It's not showing. It's blurry.
Well, you got to answer that question.
Oh, okay.
The correct answer is A, and then it'll unblurs the next section.
Okay, there we go. The term dystopia stems from another word, utopia. The English word utopia comes from the Greek eu, meaning not, and topos, meaning place. It translates literally to no place or nowhere. Thomas More coined the term in 1516 when he published a book that described the perfect fictional island society. He titled the book Utopia to emphasize that he was describing a made-up place that he considered perfect. The perfection that More and other philosophers who wrote about utopias imagined was never intended to be real. Philosophers from More to Plato understood that the perfection they wrote about did not exist in reality. It was no place.
It's kind of ironic that the word utopia translates to no place or nowhere, right? But that kind of tells us something, doesn't it? What happens when people try too hard, even in our present day or the past, to create a quote unquote perfect society? What does that end up being because they're trying too hard at something? Something ends up too strict, right? Something ends up controlling people too much, right? And then we end up with, instead of a utopia, what do we end up with? I mean, a dystopia maybe, but there's another word for it. What's it called when you have like a group of people claiming to have a perfect society, but they're really just like controlling everyone in some weird way?
A cult?
Yeah, so you end up with things like cults, right? Branch Davidians and things like that. Next paragraph, if you think of dystopian literature as holding up a funhouse mirror to society, you can also think of utopian literature as retouching a photo of society. The overly perfected image is less concerned with reality than with showing us an unobtainable perfection. And think, even if you could reach a utopia, would that make people happy? What if everything was right and fun and happy and felt good? Why would that not work psychologically? It never could, but theoretically, why would that not actually make us happy? It's a paradox.
Some people love the world that we live in now.
Well, there's that, yeah. But we have this overwhelming desire to fix everything, of course, and we're never going to stop doing that. But what is it in our lives that makes the happy parts happy? Well, it's the contrast to the other things that you experience that aren't happy or that don't feel good, right? And without that contrast, nothing would really feel happy. It would just all kind of feel blah or something, right? So it almost makes it makes like progress feel almost useless, but it's not. It's just an ongoing struggle that'll never really go away. It'll just be different. All right, but by the 1900s, can someone read from there?
I'll read.
Thank you.
But by the 1900s, for the first time in human history, perfection like that seemed possible for society. Technological advances had spurred on the Industrial Revolution. Philosophers and politicians saw this automation, and for the first time, a version of a world without difficult, toiling, physical labor seemed not only possible but likely. Economic theories advised a world without staggering class inequality or crippling poverty. At the turn of the century, the predominant view was that humanity constantly progressed. History was seen as one long forward march that would lead inevitably to perfection. However, throughout the 1900s, no matter how much many progressed, perfection was never achieved. The promises of technology and socio-political theory only resulted in war, poverty, famine, and chaos.
How disappointing it must have been to live through the first half of the 20th century. You get the mass production going, there's advances in science, you're making vaccines to diseases, And then you have World War I and World War II, right? So it's you're just never going to get there, right? And you know, people are going to keep thinking that, but there's always going to be stuff that's wrong because we're human beings and we're flawed, right? So how does that relate to the concept of a utopia? Let's answer the second question there. If you haven't already clicked on it, just click on Q2. Which of the following describe utopias? Try to answer that question. Look for the best answer. So while you might have thought they're difficult to achieve, a real true utopia, they're too perfect to exist, right? That's the whole point. So people trying too hard to reach that is what can actually, ironically, create a dystopia. And that's what stories like 1984 are about. Starting under common themes and stylistic choices. Since two of the most famous dystopian novels, 1984, which we're reading, and Brave New World, which you're reading when you're a senior, and Grip the World, their themes have been successfully reproduced in other wildly successful dystopias like The Handmaid's Tale. I don't know whether any of you seen that, it's kind of adult. The Hunger Games, which a lot of you guys know. The success of TV shows like Black Mirror. Has anybody ever seen any episodes of Black Mirror? Some of it's pretty adult content, but there's a really good episode where Bryce Dallas Howard stars in it, and everybody is obsessed with how many likes they get on social media, and it forms a class of society where you move up classes if you have more likes on your social media posts. And it seemed kind of exaggerated when it came out, like 5 years ago. It seems less of an exaggerated idea now. And video games like BioShock, if anybody's played that, our continued fascination with the worst paths our society could take. Both famous and lesser known dystopian works of art have common themes and stylistic choices. Next paragraph, somebody, George Orwell's 1984. Need another reader.
I'll read it.
Thank you.
As the century progressed, authors began to question the idea that society should be attempting perfection at all by writing dystopian fiction. Dystopia stemmed from two Greek words that translate to bad place. It describes a fictional setting that the author finds horrifying, but unlike other genres, dystopias prod the audience into examining contemporary not to the perfection will inevitably lead not to no place but to a bad place because of flaws within the system, and they made it their business to use fiction to hold funhouse mirrors to magnify those flaws and force discussion about them. Is that all?
Sorry, I was skimming around trying to figure out who was reading there. Who was that?
It was me, Sandhya.
Thank you. Okay. Where did you get to, Sandy? Did you finish that?
That paragraph.
Surveillance of Roads Freedom?
Yeah, we're on to yeah.
Okay, I'll pick up from there. Another common theme in dystopian fiction revolves around the downside of human intervention in health and genetics. Throughout the entirety of history, humans have suffered from illness and poor health. We always want to cure diseases, right? Just like we're doing now. There's a huge thing going on with racing to get these vaccines going, right? Sometimes this occurs in huge bursts, such as the Spanish influenza in 1918, which killed more people than World War I. Obviously, this was written pre-pandemic, right? Or they'd be talking about that too. More often, it is the simple result of aging. However, scientists now believe that the first person who will live to 150 years old has already been born, and that the eradication of diseases like cancer and influenza are within our reach. By the way, it's me. I'm going to live until I'm 150, just saying. In addition, a third of the way there, genetic research offers the possibility of eliminating killers like heart disease, chronic diseases like asthma. Of course, we want to try to get rid of those things, right? It's horrible that people suffer from them, but then how far do you go? Aldous Huxley's Brave New World in the 1997 movie Gattaca. Oh my God, what an absolutely wonderful, that is one of my favorite movies ever. If you like dystopia, sci-fi kind of stuff, check out that movie sometime. It's 1997, but it does not feel old at all, the way it depicts a future with genetic engineering is the dystopia that's going on there. Okay, both examine themes around what has happened to humanity when too many natural obstacles are removed or when genetic engineering can eliminate flaws. Brave New World, other dystopias that examine health and genetics magnify what happens when humans don't face natural problems and when differences in genetics are treated as differences in destiny. Right? Actually, in Gattaca, families that have money can genetically engineer their kids to be supposedly perfect or strong or really smart, and they form an upper class. And the lower class doesn't have the money to do that. They're not as talented, not as smart, not as athletic, supposedly, right? But can someone overcome that? All right, question 3. Let's try to answer that. According to the author, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, what's the best answer there? Along with Gattaca. Maybe I'll offer an extra credit project to watch Gattaca. That would be really fun. Okay, so it presents a warning about the effects of genetic research. Same thing Gattaca does. All right, that leaves you with the last 3 paragraphs. I'm not going to squeeze you too much. Make sure you guys get a nice long lunch. So why don't you guys finish reading and do that last question 4 on your own. I do want to practice looking at the site and see that everybody did that. It's just participation, but finish it up. And then back to Google Classroom for just a sec here. Don't forget that by tomorrow night, you need to watch this video is much more specifically having to do with 1984. It gives some historical context about it before you start reading it. And you've got a 13-question study guide. We're not going to have a live session tomorrow, so I'll put it on the agenda, but I'm not going to be here to remind you in person. And then finally, and I think everybody here, yeah, everybody who's here right now has their book. So I think we're all good with that. The first assignment is due by Sunday night, okay? It's the type of study guide you're used to seeing from me. You have the mention of a key passage. You have a discussion prompt that I expect a paragraph, kind of opinion response from. And you have 5 discussion questions that often ask for use details from the text to support your response. And let's see, direct quotes from the book to be used as evidence, okay? 30 points of homework for each one. Can't remember exactly how many parts of the book. We're going to be on this for a while, though, mostly a month. Due by Sunday night, and it is 20 pages long. So I try to be as detailed as possible. It's part 1, chapters 1 through 3, Roman numerals 1 through 3, and that consists of pages 1 through 20. So vocab and grammar tonight, video questions by tomorrow night, and corrections on grammar tests will be due by Friday. I haven't put that up yet. Reading by Sunday night. Don't wait until the weekend to do all that at once. Anybody have any questions? Okay, please get off to a good start. Don't get behind on the novel and not be keeping up, because that's just going to be no fun. Okay, and I want to be able to have nice, good discussions when we talk about this, because it's a dark story, but it's a fun story and it'll make you think a lot. Okay, thanks guys. See you Friday.